Hey, what's up, everyone? Sam here. I know it's technically Friday today, but it's been a crazy busy week, and I wasn't able to come on and do a thought of the day Tuesday 3 days ago, and so I wanted to make sure that I came on here and do a makeup one. So today, what I want to talk about is something that I've been noticing a lot lately, because from speaking to a lot of students who are trying to get into banking, but anytime we're trying to accomplish a goal, any goal, right? And in this case, would be getting into investment banking. Um, we have limited resources at our disposal to help us in accomplishing those goals, right? And so the in this case, the limited resource that you have is time. Okay, especially these days with how accelerated the recruiting timeline is. Most banks will start recruiting pretty much by the second half of your sophomore year, right? Some on the earlier side, like this year, banks started as early as maybe February or March. And then, even on the later side, banks are starting maybe around, June, July, like early summer-ish, right? And so you really only have about, the first 1.5 to 2 years of your college career to really do everything you need to do to get yourself into banking, right? And that's not really a lot of time considering how much you have to get done, especially since most of you probably didn't even know what investment banking was when you first got into college, right? I mean, nowadays I'm starting to meet some students who maybe are high school students and they already know they want to get into banking, but they're definitely like in the very very small minority of students, right? So most people, they probably don't even hear about investment banking until halfway through freshman year, sometimes sophomore year, sometimes junior or senior year, in which case like it's even harder. But the bottom line is, at most you have a year and a half to 2 years. Most of you probably have less time than that. And in terms of all the things that you actually have to do to be able to be competitive, it's a two-part challenge, right? You have to set yourself up to be able to get the interview. That's the first challenge that most people struggle with. Like 90% of the candidates probably don't even know what they need to do to be able to get the interview. Okay, so the vast majority of people, they don't get selected for any interviews when it comes to investment banking. Then the second challenge is being able to ace the interviews, right? And so there's probably around another 9 or 10% of the candidate pool who are able to get interviews, but they're not able to actually do well in these interviews. And so that's not good enough either, right? Because if you're just getting the interviews, but you're not actually acing it, then it doesn't really matter, right? Then the last like 1% or so, 1% or less of the applicants are actually able to not only get interviews, but also ace interviews, right? And so how are they able to do that? Or what do you need to do? What do you need to be able to do to be in that top 1%? And so let's talk about that, right? Let's break down all the different things you have to be able to do. So in terms of getting the interview, it's really two things, right? There's your application materials. So this would be things like your resume, cover letter, your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to lump that in there. That's what I call your application materials. Now, obviously, you can drill down further and say, well, in order to have a good resume, there's a lot of things you need to do right? Like ideally, you go to a target school. Although if you don't, it's not the end of the world, especially at the undergrad level. At the MBA level, it's different. You have to go to a target school, okay? But at the undergrad level, ideally, you go to a target school. If you don't, then it is what it is. You have to play with the cards that you're dealt. Ideally, you have really good grades, right? Again, 3.7 or above, no one's going to question you about it. 3.5 or above, you're probably like still fine, because even the banks that have absolute hard cutoffs usually don't set it at anywhere higher than 3.5. So you have 3.5 or above, you won't be automatically eliminated from any banks. If you have less than a 3.5, I have seen banks who have minimum GPA requirements, like hard cutoffs at 3.5. So you're going to miss out on some opportunities. But at the same time, I have plenty of clients who have had 3.2s, 3.3s, 3.4s who have been able to get jobs in investment banking. So it's not the end of the world, right? But then like you go any lower than that, now it's going to start to become really, really difficult. So long story short, on the GPA side, obviously the higher your grades are, the easier it's going to be, right? If your grades aren't quite at a 3.7 or 3.5, that's okay. It just means that you need to be even better in all the other aspects that you have all the other aspects of recruiting, right? And so what are these other aspects? So let's keep going, right? Like the rest of your resume is like, hey, your work experience, having relevant work experience, being in relevant student clubs and organizations on campus, right? Those are all, and doing other things to demonstrate that you're genuinely interested in this field, right? In this career path. Case competitions, like other projects, special projects that you worked on. It could be a lot of different things, right? And we won't get into the weeds here, but long story short, like accumulating the right experiences that you can put onto your resume, that takes a lot of time, right? Like doing an internship, usually that's like a 3-month internship at a minimum, right? And maybe it's 15 to 20 hours a week or whatever. And I'm not just talking about doing these during the summer, but a lot of my clients and a lot of the most competitive candidates nowadays actually are doing these during the semester on top of their schoolwork, right? So think about that. You're trying to maintain a high GPA, which is basically like a full-time gig in and of itself. So you're a full-time student, right? You're also doing part-time internships on the side. You're also joining student organizations and trying to take on leadership positions. And then on top of that, let's add there's more, right? That part is just the application itself, right? And by the way, you have to learn how to package all these experiences together in a clear and in a clear and effective and concise way on a piece of paper, right? Which is your resume, and it has to be as impressive and as relevant as possible. And a lot of you are really, really bad at doing that. Like I've seen a lot of pretty horrible resumes. Okay, and so having the substance to back it up is one thing, but then being able to market it and being able to position yourself in an effective way is another thing, right? And so that's like the resume stuff. So obviously, a lot of time goes into building up your resume and accumulating the experiences that you need to build that up. Then on top of that, you got to network, right? We're still just on getting the interview. Okay, we haven't gotten to the interview portion yet. In terms of what you need to do to get the interview, you have to network your butt off, right? I don't care if you go to an Ivy League school or if you go to a non-target state school. I mean, obviously there's a difference in terms of how easy it is to network. Like if you go to a target school, you can have a lot more alumni from your school that are already working on Wall Street that you can reach out to, but you still got to do it, right? It still takes time. You still got to reach out. You still got to talk to them. And just so you guys know, like networking itself is that in and of itself is another like competition, right? I always tell my clients like networking is kind of like the interview before the interview, right? It's you're auditioning for the opportunity to actually get the interview, right? And when you're networking with these bankers, everybody else is trying to do the same things, and they can't help every single person, nor do they want to, right? Because they don't get anything for helping you, right? There is downside to helping you if you're the wrong candidate, because then it's going to make them look bad if they refer you for an interview and then you don't do well, right? And so it's your job to basically make them feel like, one, you're qualified and you know your shit, and you're going to be able to do well if they were to interview, if they were to refer you, and you're not going to make them look bad. But secondly, also, even if you are qualified, there's going to be a lot of other students who are also trying to network with them, who are just as qualified, right? Or maybe even more so, right? And so, out of all the candidates who are qualified, the second thing that has to happen is that they have to like you, just like genuinely as a human being. They have to want to help you, right? There needs to be that rapport there. There needs to be a strong relationship, because out of all the qualified candidates, they can only refer like 1 or 2 people at most. What reason do they have to choose you over everybody else? It really just comes down to, well, who do I feel like helping, right? And so at the end of the day, networking is really a numbers game, right? Like you're not gonna get every single person you reach out to talk to you, right? Because a lot of times these people are strangers, and you're not gonna get every single person that you end up talking to actually refer you, because like there are a lot of other people trying to do the same things, and you're not always gonna be every single banker's favorite candidate, right? So Networking actually takes a lot more time than most people realize. Like a lot of times I talk to you guys and I'll ask you guys, hey, how many bankers have you actually reached out to so far in terms of your networking efforts? And you guys will proudly tell me, oh yeah, I've done a lot of networking. I've talked to like 20 bankers already. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Um, it's really not enough, right? Like just so you guys know, um, most of my clients on average, they probably reach out to hundreds of bankers throughout the recruiting process, right? And so if you're reaching out to 20 or 30 and they're reaching out to hundreds of bankers, I mean, who do you think is going to have a higher chance of getting these referrals, right? I think it's a no-brainer, right? And so networking, add that onto your plate. That's the super time consuming thing because you got to contact these people and then like your goal is to get them to talk to you, and assuming they agree to talk to you, every single person that agrees to talk to you is probably like another 30-minute conversation, right? And if it's in person, like if you're able to do an in-person coffee chat as opposed to over the phone, there's also the commute time. You had to go there, you had to come back, whatever. So it's really time consuming, right? So networking, add that onto your plate, okay? And those are all the things that you have to do just to get the interview, right? And like if you do all of those things right, and if you do all those things well, and by the way, on the networking side of things, the biggest determining factor in terms of how much time it's going to take you is actually how good you are at networking, right? Because if you suck at networking, like most of the students that I talk to have no idea what they're doing, and they're just kind of like winging it, right? Like they never really had to network before they recruited for banking before. And this is the first time they're doing it. And they're like, oh, I just go out, I just talk to them. I ask them like some questions I prepared. And then, ask the same questions every time. And then like ask them for advice on like, oh, what it's like to work in investment banking? How do they get to where they are? And then like at the end of the conversation, nothing happens, right? I don't really get anything out of it. Like, oh, I got some information or I got some tips and tricks, but it's always the same superficial stuff that I get in every single conversation. And so you're just having all these same conversations over and over again, not really getting any additional value, and it's burning empty calories, right? So if you're doing that, like most students that I talk to, they're converting at around like 2 or 3%, right? Meaning out of every 100 bankers that they reach out to, a percentage of those bankers will talk to them, and then like only a very small percentage of those people will help them, right? So maybe out of 100 bankers they reach out to, they get 2 or 3 bankers who are actually like truly helpful and become advocates. And if you think about that, it's just like, how much time is that going to take, right? If you're only converting at 2 or 3%, depending on the number of banks that you're applying to, like, and ideally you want at least like probably 2 to 3 advocates at each bank you're applying to, right? So you can do the math. Like if you're applying to 20 banks and you need 2 people at each bank, that's 40 people that you want to win over, right? And if you're at 40 people and you're converting at 3%, you need to reach out to over 1,300 bankers. Think about how much time that's going to take, right? So obviously it's not viable. It's not efficient. I don't even know if it's possible, right? I mean, anything's possible, but like it's not what you want to do, right? And so the key too with like efficiency and how much time it's going to take is also how do you get better at networking, right? How do you increase your conversion rate? There are actual like best practices and steps that you can follow to optimize your networking funnel so that instead of converting at 2 to 3%, you're converting at, let's say, closer to 15%, right? Which is still nowhere close to being perfect, but like 15% conversion rate for networking is actually pretty freaking phenomenal, right? Now, same thing again, if I need 40 people, I'm converting at 15%. I only need to reach out to around 265 people or so, right? I said only, but it's still a lot, right? But like that's the type of thing you got to be thinking about. It's like not just blindly going about messaging people. Like the reason why people only reach out to 20 to 30 bankers and they feel like it's a lot is because they haven't done the freaking math, right? And so if you think about it, okay, you got to reach out to hundreds of bankers, add that onto best case scenario. You only need to reach out to hundreds of bankers, assuming you really know what you're doing, you're really good at this. Add that to your plate. Okay. So we have school, we have work, we have internships, we have extracurricular activities, we have networking. All of that is on your plate right now. Okay. You have to fit that into the 24 hours you have in a day. And then now let's talk about the second challenge of acing the interview, because you're only doing what you need to do to get the interviews, but you can't ace the interviews when you get them. Like I said, there's no point, right? So now add the time it takes for you to study for your behavioral interviews, add the time it takes for you to learn your technicals, we already have like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 things that you have to do on your plate, right? So this is what I mean when I say, how are you allocating your limited resources? You have 24 hours in a day, every day, from now until whenever you have to recruit, okay? And how much time you have to prepare depends on how soon you figured out that you want to do banking, right? Then, like every single, what you need to realize is that every single thing you do has an opportunity cost, right? Like if you suck at networking and you have to spend a lot more time reaching out to people just to get to the number of referrals you need, that's going to take time away from you to be able to, study for your exams and do your homework and do well in school and have a good GPA, right? Or if you have to spend more time, um, like if you have to spend more time doing your studying for school, right? Then that's going to take time away from your ability to maybe do an internship if you want to keep your grades up, right? And so I don't know like what your personal situation is. Everybody's different, but my point is like every single thing you're doing, you should always be thinking about what is the most efficient way that I can get this thing done and do it well, right? Because the more time that it takes me to do this one thing, it's gonna take away the time that I have to do these other things, right? And so for most people, when it comes to investment banking, recruiting, the reason they fail is not because what you have to do is actually rocket science. Like none of this stuff is rocket science, but the reason why people fail is because they run out of time. They don't have enough time to check all these boxes. And none of these things that I've talked about are optional, right? Like whether it's your resume, your experience, your GPA, your interview skills, technicals, behaviorals, networking, like all of these things are mandatory. You got to be good at all of them. And you're only going to go as far as your weakest link allows you to go, right? And so most people, like maybe they're able to check 2 or 3 of the boxes, but not all of them. And that causes them to not be good enough, right? And so if you don't have enough time, right, as is, like, by the way, like I'm assuming that you're basically dedicating almost 100% of your time to school and recruiting and like sleep, right? Like obviously you're gonna have to make sacrifices if you don't have enough time. Like the first the first thing you gotta do is like cut out the unnecessary things, right? So maybe you don't get to see your friends as much. Maybe you don't go to the parties. Maybe you don't go to a music festival. I don't know. Maybe you don't watch Netflix. Okay, like um, a lack of resources. Basically, what it requires you to do is prioritize, right? And so I said in the description of this video that the answer starts with P, right? The word is prioritization. Like when someone says I don't have enough time to do something, a lot of the times it's because they're not prioritizing the right way, right? Or if you say I don't have time for something, what you're actually saying is like that thing is not important enough for me to spend time on. Okay, so you got to prioritize, but then let's sometimes though, even if you prioritize, you still might not have enough time. Okay, like let's say you've already cut out everything else that you're not supposed to be doing. You're already spending all 24 hours of the day only working on school and recruiting and sleeping very little already. Okay, it's possible that you still might not have enough time, right? Because maybe you started too late, or maybe like some of this stuff is just really hard to you. Like for some people, like it's just really hard. The technicals are really hard. They can't figure it out. Or the behaviors are really hard. They try to like come up with their own answers, but it's just not good no matter what, right? Or they just don't know how to network. They can't figure it out. And so they're only converting at 2% or 3% or 1% or worse, right? And so sometimes it's not for lack of trying. Sometimes you've already prioritized and you still don't have enough time. Then in that case, you got to get help, right? Because chances are there are probably better ways of doing every single one of these things than how you are currently doing it. You just don't know how to do that, right? And so if you're talking about getting help, like here comes the plug, right? It's like obviously that's what I'm here for, but I'm still on the topic of like allocating your limited resources. The other thing that I'm running into is like, obviously, hey, I run this as a business, right? I do have clients that I help with recruiting outside of like not saying like you guys in this group, like you got like this group I run for free. Like this is just like, hey, me doing as a service, pro bono for everybody, right? But I do have clients that I take on that I work with very, very closely where I'm helping them with every single step of the process. Like all the things that we just talked about, I'm in the trenches with them, helping them every step along the way, leveraging the experiences that I've had to date, both from my time in banking and in private equity myself as a candidate, but also from my time having been on the on-campus recruiting team at Morgan Stanley, right? With the intimate knowledge that I have of how recruiting works at these banks, what they look for, what they ask during interviews, what they look for on resumes, how bankers like what bankers like to see during networking conversations, like all of that knowledge I've accumulated, as well as all the trial and error that I've already done on your behalf from helping all of my other clients succeed before you, right? Like whatever mistakes my other clients have already made, you don't have to make the same mistakes, right? And so we've developed a system that's like, you know, super effective and efficient. It's like if you care about efficiency and if you don't have enough time and you want to do everything as quickly as possible, like I have not found a better system out there or more efficient system than how we're doing things here. Okay. Now, with that said, obviously, like there's an investment in the program, right? And a lot of times when I'm hearing from students is like, oh yeah, they would love to have that. They would love to get my help, but then they're not willing to invest in the program. And to me, it's just like this because they say, "Oh, I don't have money, or I don't have enough money." And then like you dig more, and you find out that oh well, they just went on a vacation. They just went on a 2 3 week vacation, traveling in Southeast Asia, or they've been spending the summer in New York, spending about $1,000 every week going out, partying, drinking, eating out in nice restaurants, or like, they've been going to music festivals and they spend too much money on that. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But again, when someone says they don't have time or when someone says they don't have money, it's the same thing, right? Both time and money are limited resources. And it just comes down to the trade-offs that you're making, right? When you don't have money for something, what that tells me is not that you don't have money, is that you don't think it's important enough for you to spend your money on that, right? But it's important enough for you to spend money on music festivals and food and going out and having fun and taking vacations and pleasure and whatever, right? And so then that says a lot about your priorities, right? Like honestly, all the candidates I met, like uh, given how hard investment banking recruiting is, unless you're willing to put investment banking recruiting as your number one priority, chances are you are not going to be able to make the cut. Right? These top tier banks, at least that I'm talking about, like they accept 1% or less of their applicant pool, right? And so if you're trying to do something that difficult and you're not willing to make that your number one priority and put everything you got into it, and you'd rather spend whether it's your time and or your money on other things, just statistically it's going to be extremely difficult, right? It's like an athlete who's trying to make it into the pros, like they put everything they have into their training, into preparing, into lifting weights, into practicing, into just like preparing themselves to make it to the NBA or the NFL or whatever, right? And so you gotta you gotta be willing to prioritize things um, accordingly based on how important it is to you, right? And so anytime now when I hear people say I don't have time or I don't have money or whatever, like to me it's just like, dude, you got to prioritize, right? Because I've seen people who have been really, really poor, didn't have money, but they're so determined to get into investment banking that they went out and they got resourceful and they found the money and they got it together, right? And then they ended up getting a job and then now they're no longer poor, right? And it's like they understood that this was the thing that was gonna like basically change your entire career trajectory and change your life, right? And so the answer to, you know, limited resources, having limited resources, which is always going to be the case in life until you become, at least with time, but like with money, okay, fine, maybe one day you become like multimillionaire, billionaire, or whatever, and then it's not so limited anymore. But until then, time and money always going to be limited no matter what. In this game of life, the whole objective is to figure out how to make the most out of the limited amount of time and money that you have so that you can be as successful as possible, right? And so if your priorities are currently messed up, you should reevaluate and you should think about where are you spending your time and where are you spending your money, right? And until you fix that, um, you know what? Like you're probably not going to get into investment banking as much as I hate to say it, right? So that's my little thought of the day for this week. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. If you have any questions, thoughts, or whatever, drop it down below in the comments. Otherwise, look, like I said, if any of you feel like, hey, you don't have enough time right now, or you just don't know what you're doing, or you've been trying on your own for a long time and you're not being efficient, it's not effective, and you need help, then schedule a free strategy session with me, right? Um, and on the strategy session, like what we're going to talk about is just figuring out where you're at in the recruiting process. What is it that you think you need help with? Where are you trying to go? What are your goals and aspirations? And then like just helping me understand your situation more so that I can give you some advice on what I think is the best move going forward for you, right? If that means like, hey, I can help you or I should help you or like I'm your best hope, I want to tell you that, right? But just to be completely honest, like I'm not always going to be the best person to help you. And I don't always, I'm not going to pretend to always be the best person to help you. Like a lot of students I talk to who I can't help, like I just give them advice on something else that I think they should be doing instead, right? So no matter what, you're going to walk away from this conversation with the best plan of action based on your situation, okay? Because like I can't, nor do I want to help all of you. Like I don't have the time. I'm like one person, you know what I'm saying? So there's so many of you in this group. There's over like 1,500, almost 1,600 people now. I literally cannot help all of you, but happy to at least have a conversation, just to kind of give you some advice, point you in the right direction, and then like see where you go from there, right? So anyway, I will drop a link down here below in the comments. Schedule a strategy session. All right, guys. So I dropped the link down there. So for those of you who are interested, go ahead and book that. My calendars get filled up pretty quickly, and I probably only talk to about 3 or 4 people every day. So, because I also have to like help my own clients and things like that. So, go ahead and click on that link, book an appointment, fill out the application. It'll help me make the call more productive for you, and then let's get you started down this path of recruiting success as soon as possible. Because, like I already said, you have a limited amount of time, right? Every day that goes by without an actual game plan that you can execute on, you're just losing time, and your chances of succeeding are just going down. Okay. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. I look forward to talking to you guys, and I will be back again next week. All right. Bye.